Thank you. The jury's on its way in. Ms. MacNeill, will you retake the witness stand, please?
Your Honor, the setup didn't work, and so we'll just use the computer, if that's all right.
Oh, do you need a minute?
No, I just wanted to inform you that we're not going to be able to use that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
We've tried it before. All rise for the jury.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. We're back on the record in the matter of State of Utah versus MacNeill. Mr. MacNeill is present with his counsel. The state's attorneys are present. Rachel MacNeill is on the witness stand.
Before cross-examination, I have just a couple more questions.
Very good. Why don't you conclude?
Rachel, earlier in your testimony, you mentioned that your father said he was physically unable to pull your mom out of the tub.
Yes.
Okay. Before your mother passed away, in the days leading up to her passing,
Yes.
did you see your father carrying anything heavy?
He's remodeling the basement, and so he's running with sheetrock, big sheetrock. preliminary?
Yeah, preliminary hearing.
Yes,
And you testified at that hearing,
I did.
much like today.
Yes,
And you didn't mention at that preliminary hearing that your dad was joking about being single at the funeral luncheon, did you?
I don't recall.
Okay. And you also had a meeting with Doug Whitney, and do you know who Doug Whitney is?
Yes,
He's the investigator in this case.
yes,
And he interviewed you,
yes,
and that interview was tape recorded,
yes,
and Alexis was there as well.
yes.
And you never said anything to Doug Whitney about your dad joking about being single at the luncheon, did you?
Again, I don't recall.
All right. Now, when you went out into the garage, did you see the hospital bed in the garage? Is that what you're saying, or?
In the garage, that's where everything was.
Okay.
So, yes.
Did you see the hospital bed there?
It was a big bloody mess of everything. So,
All right.
I don't,
Now, you talked about Easter. Okay, and Easter was several days after your mom's surgery
yes,
in 2007,
a few days after my mother's
and
surgery.
you were at the house that day.
I was.
And your mother was sick that day.
My mother had just had surgery.
And she wasn't feeling well that day on Easter.
She had just had surgery.
And can you answer my question? She wasn't feeling well on that day, was she?
Do you-
Can you just?
No, because she just had surgery.
Okay, and she was feeling sick that day.
She felt a little nauseous.
Okay, and she wasn't participating in Easter activities, correct?
Easter activities.
Yeah, like you guys had a dinner that day. Alexis made dinner for Easter. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
Okay, and your mother did not participate in that?
Well, we all went and were with my mother, so I don't.
But she was in bed, isn't that right?
Yes, she was.
And she was in bed all day?
I left the home, so I'm not aware if she was in bed all day.
Okay, but she was in bed when you saw her because she was
Yes.
sick?
Well, she was in bed when I saw her.
And she was in bed because you said she was feeling sick?
Like I said, she felt a little nauseous. She just had surgery. She doesn't.
She wasn't just feeling nauseous, she had a migraine that day. Do you recall testifying about that?
Here's the copy.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Can I direct you to lines 15 through 20, Rachel?
Is this the?
This is the
Preliminary
preliminary
hearing?
hearing
Okay.
transcript. Okay, and you said that your mother was in pain that day?
Okay.
Does that refresh your memory right there on line 15?
Yes.
She was in pain,
She had a migraine.
and she had a migraine?
Yes.
Okay, and then that you stated also that she was feeling sick, correct, on line 22?
Yes, so it says sick. So
Okay,
that's,
that she was feeling sick?
yes.
When you arrived home on April 7th, 2011, there were people coming over bringing food?
April 7, 2011?
April 11th, 2007, April 11th, the day of your mother's death,
Yes.
okay?
April 11th,
And so when you-
2007.
Sorry, and so you arrived home. Were there people coming to the house bringing casseroles and things?
Yes.
And neighbors coming in?
Yes.
And Eileen Hang was there?
Eileen?
Eileen?
Yes.
And Damien, your brother?
Yes.
And you stated that you went right to the bedroom to see your dad?
Yes.
Okay, and you wanted to help your dad?
Wanted to make sure he was okay.
And you've testified that your dad was completely distraught, isn't that right?
He was sitting on the couch and just said that she's ruined. Ada's ruined.
But he talked about Michelle too, not just Ada, is that right? He talked about your
Yes, he was.
and he was distraught. Isn't that what you've
But that,
testified to before?
at that time, yes, but to neighbors, he was showing them the remodeling. So it was, I mean, just
I'm-
right away,
I'm just directing you to when you saw him.
right when I saw him.
Yeah, and
Yes.
he was distraught.
Yes, that moment he was,
And
yes.
at that moment, he was depressed.
That moment, he appeared depressed.
And he was crying, right?
I believe so.
And he stated, your mom was my rock.
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
And you recall your dad just kind of almost staring and he wasn't able to speak much. Do you recall stating that?
At that moment, I don't remember.
Okay, that's fine. Now, you came up here and you did a demonstration for us at the tub?
Yes.
And you mentioned that your dad had said that your mom's feet were sticking out.
Yes.
And you used that terminology at the preliminary hearing as well, that he had said that your mom's feet were sticking out of the tub. Isn't that right?
I haven't seen the preliminary hearing since
That was your testimony today, that her feet were sticking out.
yes.
Let's talk about these towels in the garage. Okay, you said you went to the garage, and were there separate piles of things, or was everything
Everything's-
together?
Everything's together, just wadded up and thrown.
Okay, what was wadded up? Were the towels and the garments wadded up?
It's everything that was, it was the towels, the decorative towels that were in my mother's room, or the bathroom. The little stuffed animals, everything. It was just a big pile thrown in the garage.
And the clothes that you just viewed, the bra and the black shirt and her garments, those were in the pile with the towels?
Everything was just a big, just thrown bloody mess. I mean, that's,
And isn't it true that there wasn't a lot of blood, but there was some blood on the towels and some blood on the clothes, correct?
I'm not good with blood. So what I saw is the blood and everything being wet, so I'm not sure. You can, the question. I hate
Approach, Your Honor.
You may,
May I continue with your question?
please.
Rachel, this is an interview with Doug Whitney. Can you tell the jury what you told him when, during that interview about the blood and the clothes?
This is the interview that I had with Doug Whitney. And so you would like me to read it?
Yes.
And everything was just wet and then had some blood on it, and that was the only thing that I...
Okay, so there was some blood. It seemed like you had made it seem earlier that there was tons of blood somewhere.
No, I'm not good at seeing blood.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So
But
any
so it
blood
makes
would-
me sick.
Okay, so any blood would upset you, correct?
Blood is not something I like to see. No, not my mother's blood.
Okay, and everything of your mother's, you went and washed, correct? In terms of the clothing that you saw that day?
Yes, what was my mother's and the towels and
Okay, so you washed the towels, and you washed the bra?
I've got the pile and threw it in the laundry
Okay.
to wash it. So
And after, what time did you, when,
it was what time?
yeah, was it a couple days later? Was it immediately
It was it was April 11th, 2007.
when you washed them?
Yes.
Okay, and then you took them out and you dried them, and tell me what you did with the clothing of your mother's that you washed.
Put it in a bag.
And those are the things that you washed were the things that you witnessed today, the bra and the black shirt. Is that a yes? The bra.
Is that the end of the question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So you washed the bra?
Yes.
And you put the bra in
Well-
the bag?
I took the pile of things and put them in the laundry and washed them.
Okay.
And then I put the things that I washed in a bag.
And the things that you found of your mother's clothing, you kept and you put in that bag, correct?
And then I handed them over.
Yes, to the
So, yes.
police. When did you do that? When did you hand that over to the police?
I'm not sure of the exact date.
Okay, but it wasn't April 11th, 2007.
Oh, no.
And it was a couple years later, correct?
I'm not sure of the exact date.
Okay, but I'm just saying it wasn't that day.
Oh, no, not at all.
And the clothes were kept in the garage until you turned them over to the police?
No, I kept them.
But
So
when-
I got them from the garage and washed them,
Okay.
put them in a bag.
And then you
I
immediately
kept
took
them.
them with you?
Yes.
Okay, they were never placed back in the garage?
No.
Okay. And you were concerned about your other siblings seeing what was in the garage, isn't that right, Rachel?
Yes.
You didn't want your siblings,
To see their little stuffed animals with,
and you also didn't want them to see.
I mean, my little
your-
sisters.
Yeah, you didn't want your little sisters to see your mother's clothing with some blood on it. Is that right?
I didn't want to show my little sisters'
Well, you didn't
blood
want
clothing.
You didn't want them to see that. And that's one of the reasons you washed the clothes, was because you didn't want your sisters to come home and go into the garage and see your mother's clothes that had some blood on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to keep the things of my mother's, and I would never want my little baby sisters to see blood on.
Exactly, and so that was
My
one of
mother's
the
clothings.
reasons why you took the clothing and washed it, right?
My dad told me to get rid of it. So I wanted to wash it. I didn't want to keep bloody clothing with me, but I didn't want to throw out anything of my mother's.
Okay. But that was a concern of yours as well, as that day on April 11th, 2007, you didn't want your little sisters going into the garage and seeing the towels that had some blood on it and your mother's clothing with some blood on it. That was one of your concerns. I'm not saying that that's all.
Is that a statement I made? I mean, is that what you're saying?
Yes, I mean, do you remember stating that to Doug Whitney?
That sounds like me, but I don't remember specifically stating that.
Okay, but do you recall maybe saying that to Doug Whitney and having a conversation that that was one of your concerns?
I don't recall exactly what I said to Doug Whitney because it was such a long time ago. But that,
And I'm
So-
not really caring what you said to him, but would that have been one of your concerns is all I'm saying?
I'm always concerned about my little sisters, and yes, I
One
mean,
of
that
your
would be,
concerns that day would have been that you wouldn't want them to walk into the garage and see the clothing and towels with any blood on it.
Overruled. I don't think I have an answer yet.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Let me start over. So is it fair to say that one of your
Is
concerns,
this a question? It feels like a statement,
it's a
so I don't,
question.
okay.
was it one of your concerns that day? I'm not asking you what you said to Doug Whitney.
Okay.
Was it one of your concerns that day that you didn't want your little sisters to see what was in the garage?
I don't remember exactly, but that sounds correct.
Okay, that's all I have,
I'm
Rachel. That's
sorry.
all I was trying to get at.
I don't remember.
Okay, now you stated today that your dad made a statement about the autopsy. Your mother's
Continually
autopsy.
talked about the autopsy.
Something that he wanted to get the autopsy done
Yes, he was.
because he was concerned that people would think he had killed your mother. Is that along the lines of what you said he said?
Yes.
Okay. When was this? When was this statement made?
April 11th, 2007.
When was it? Right when you got home? Was it
No,
a demonstration in the tub?
I don't recall the exact time. It was later.
And
Evening.
like I've talked
I'm
about,
sorry, it was what? She said it was later what?
It was later after the demonstration.
Okay, can you give me a time and
No, I don't have an exact time, but
All right,
but it was later that.
But you said he
Same
brought that
day,
up during the
that night.
demonstration as well, that he brought up the autopsy
He
during the
kept
demonstration.
bringing it up. He brought it up a lot, so I'm unsure
Okay, and so Alexis was there
specifically at
when he
what time.
brought up this
He
autopsy.
continually brought up the autopsy.
Okay. Now, you've said that you had an interview with Doug Whitney, correct?
I did,
And Alexis was present.
yes.
And you never mentioned to Doug Whitney during that interview that Martin had said anything about the autopsy, and I need to get the autopsy done because I'm concerned that people may think that I murdered your mother. Isn't that right?
I don't remember what I said to Doug Whitney in that interview exactly.
All right, but you did talk to Doug Whitney about the autopsy. Do you remember that?
That was so long ago, and I apologize, but I don't remember specifically what I said to Doug Whitney.
All right, do you?
May I? Thank you.
Hang on to those.
Do you have the interview transcript there, Rachel?
I'm not sure. Is this the interview
No,
transcript?
I don't think so.
I do not know.
Suzanne, it's right here.
Rachel, can you turn to page 53? And I'm referring you to line 11 and line 12. In that line, it's you who brought up the autopsy with your dad, right? You said, "Dad, the autopsy will show
So
you."
line 11?
Yeah, line 12.
I don't see where it says dad, so I'm unsure of what you're speaking
You were
of.
speaking with your dad, correct?
I don't, so when, so this is the
Here's line
Doug
12.
Whitney, no, I know what line 12 is, but I'm unsure of how this is
Okay,
printed. What is
that's
it?
you talking, Rachel, that means you.
Mhm.
Martin, that's your dad.
No, I know who that is, but this is when I was speaking with Doug Whitney?
Yes.
Right, so
Okay.
this is what I stated, the entire thing, and then
Yes, and so down at line 12,
I've
you're
never seen
speaking
anything like
there.
this before.
And didn't you bring up with
I'm
Doug-
speaking during this whole thing.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes,
But I'm
okay.
referring you to line 12 specifically.
Okay,
You said the autopsy will show you didn't do anything then.
okay.
And that was in reference to talking to your dad, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so,
that's done.
and I know you don't remember, but in this entire interview over here, you don't remember saying anything about, your dad saying anything about the autopsy, right? Or saying anything about,
This,
you don't recall telling Doug Whitney that your dad said something about the autopsy, that I need to get the autopsy done?
I've not seen this
Okay.
or
So you
read
don't know,
this,
so
or
you
I
don't
don't,
know,
I don't know exactly what I said in an interview that many years ago.
okay. But you do know just what I've pointed out on this page, that the autopsy was brought up at this point, correct? Just what I
That's
showed you?
what you just showed me, yes.
And that was you saying that, correct? The autopsy will show you didn't do anything.
My dad repeatedly talked about the autopsy, and I said, then the autopsy will show you didn't do anything,
Okay, but
okay?
what I'm saying is you don't know what's in the rest of this. You don't recall saying that to Doug Whitney in this.
I don't,
Okay.
that was a long time ago. I don't remember the exact everything that I said in here.
Okay.
I don't have a photographic memory.
And I raised that issue at the preliminary hearing. Do you recall that? Where I said, Rachel, you've never told anybody about this autopsy statement before?
I do not remember. Starting, what, 17 or 18? No, page 1583, line 18? Is that what you mean? Okay. And what's
And
this?
Rachel, I said at that preliminary hearing, and you never mentioned to anybody prior to today that your dad had stated that he was concerned about the autopsy results. Isn't that correct? And then you said prior to today? Is that correct?
I'm sorry, do you mind telling me what this is?
Yeah, this is the preliminary hearing transcript.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
All right.
Why don't you read the questions, you read the answers.
okay,
Go ahead. Let's begin again.
okay. This was my question. You never mentioned to anybody prior to today that your dad had stated that he was concerned about the autopsy results. Isn't that correct?
And my answer, line 22, prior to today,
Yes.
answer, that's not correct.
And I said, okay, who did you tell?
The answer is I told the last time I was interviewed, I spoke with prosecutors.
Okay, and that had happened right before the preliminary hearing, isn't that correct? You met with the prosecutors right before the preliminary hearing?
I did meet with the prosecutors prior to the preliminary hearing.
And that's when you told them about the autopsy statement.
I mean, would you like me to read the answer again?
Yes.
I told them the last time I was interviewed, I spoke with prosecutors.
Okay, and that was referring to right before the preliminary hearing.
Again, I don't recall exactly what I said to Doug Whitney, and I don't recall exactly word for word everything that I've said in the preliminary hearing as well.
Okay, so let's go
So-
through that. So on page 1584, on 1583, I said, who did you tell? And then on page
State the question.
1584,
So page 1583,
yes, and then
Okay.
1584, line 1, what was your answer?
1583, line,
1584, line 1.
so you just want me to read the answer again? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, please.
Okay. I told the last time I was interviewed, I spoke with prosecutors.
Okay, which did you talk? Did you tell this to Doug Whitney?
You want me to say read this, what I said at the time?
Yes.
I said, no, I don't believe I was asked that question, so I didn't. Well, I stated everything.
Okay, and so you were moved down
I
to
didn't state
line-
everything.
We're talking about when you told somebody this, and it was on
Oh,
line
what line are we on?
15,
Line 15?
and you answer that. When I
So
said,
if we're
who did you?
skipping this,
Sorry. I said, who did you tell that to, or whom did you tell that to? Chad and what was your
the
answer?
line,
Line 15?
right, but who did you tell it? You asked. I said, the answer on line 15 is, yeah, Chad, I believe Jeff was there.
And Jeff, you mean Jeff Robinson?
Yes,
And he's an investigator with the Utah County Attorney's Office?
yes,
And Chad, you mean Chad Grunander, who's a prosecutor,
yes,
and he's sitting at this table?
yes, Jeff and Chad.
Okay. And then I said, when were they asking you these questions? Line 20?
You'd like me to read line 20?
Yes.
I don't remember the specific date. It was recently.
Okay, so meaning recently meant recently prior to the preliminary hearing in this case, right?
Can you ask that question again? I'm sorry.
Sorry. When you meant by talking recently to Chad Grunander and Jeff Robinson, when you mentioned this at the preliminary hearing, what you meant by that was that you had talked to Chad and Jeff recently. Is that right? Isn't that what you stated?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Okay. My question is, we just went over this, and you said, I asked you,
Your question was, we just went over this?
my question
Sorry.
in line 19 was, when were they asking you those questions, right?
Yes.
And then you answered. Can you say what you answered again?
I don't remember the specific date. It was recently.
Okay, so when you said it was recently, what you're referring to is that you recently talked to Chad Grunander and Jeff Robinson.
Prior to the preliminary
Yes.
hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
And so the time that you were talking about, that first brought up the autopsy statement, was prior to the preliminary hearing, very recently prior to the preliminary hearing, right?
Once again, I don't recall everything that was that I interviewed with Doug Whitney. I don't remember every single thing I said.
Okay, but that's what you testified at the preliminary hearing, correct? That you brought up the autopsy statement prior to the preliminary hearing, and it was recently. And I think we've established
So
that. I'm not
that I may
arguing
have-
with you.
Oh,
I mean, I think that
Not
I've
trying to
laid that
argue.
out, so I'll just move on.
is that a question?
Okay, so let's talk about when your dad was talking to Dr. Fricke, the medical examiner.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's talk about that.
All right,
Okay.
Dr. Fricke was on the speakerphone,
Yes.
and your dad was there,
My dad was speaking with her.
and Alexis was there,
Yes.
and Alexis was adamant about speaking to the medical examiner, correct?
Alexis wanted to be present at when my dad was talking to the medical examiner.
Okay, and she was present, correct, on the speakerphone?
Yes.
Okay, well, she was present actually there. Dr. Fricke was on the speakerphone. Alexis
So
was
my dad and Alexis were
in the room.
in the room,
Okay.
and yes, Dr. Fricke was on the telephone. She was not in the room.
And Alexis asked a lot of questions.
No. Alexis asked a lot of questions.
Yes. Did Alexis ask a lot of questions of Dr. Fricke?
My dad was speaking with Dr. Fricke.
But Alexis asked a lot of questions of Dr. Fricke as well.
I don't remember.
Okay, can you turn to page 53 of your interview transcript?
Which one? The interview with Doug Whitney, not the preliminary? Is that which one?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's the interview with Doug Whitney. It's
Thank
not the
you.
preliminary hearing.
Okay, sorry.
Page 53.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm on page 53.
Line 33.
Yes.
Okay, and so you told Doug Whitney that Alexis asked a lot of questions and medical things,
Okay.
right?
That's what it said, but unfortunately, I don't remember.
I understand that you don't remember. I'm not beating up on you for not remembering that. I'm just asking you that you told Doug Whitney that Alexis
I'm on the
was.
speakerphone when they talked about the autopsy and asked a lot of questions and medical things.
Why don't you just read
When-
that for the jury? Why don't you just read lines 33 through 35?
Okay. Can I read above that so I understand what was
Just read what she
being
told
said?
you.
Okay, sorry. So line 33 through 35? Okay. Him being on the speakerphone when they talked about the autopsy, and Alexis asked a lot of questions and medical things, and I kept on leaving the room for that. I didn't want to hear medical things about my mom. It was too much. Alexis was very inquisitive.
Okay. Now, before the funeral occurred, You helped your dad get ready, isn't that right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and he was, you remember when he was just getting out of the shower?
Yes,
Okay, and you helped him, like, get his shirt on and things like that?
yes.
And your dad was upset and crying, isn't that right?
Yes, I helped him get on his shirt.
Okay, now turning to the temple incident where you met Gypsy. Do you remember the day that that occurred, or do you just know that it was soon after your mother's death?
I believe it was the Tuesday after the funeral.
Okay, and did you have that written down somewhere?
Not that I recall.
All right. Could it have been the following Tuesday?
No.
Was it when Martin's sister and brother-in-law were still in town?
I don't recall how long they were in town. Sorry.
Now, today you said that you talked to your dad on the phone on the day of your mother's death about you being the nanny.
Today I said that I talked to my dad on the phone
Yeah,
about being the nanny.
Today you testified that on the day of your mother's death, you talked to him about who was going to be the nanny for the children, right?
I didn't talk to my father on the phone about that on the day of my mother's death.
Okay, I thought there
So-
was some kind of a phone call that you
Can
talked to
you
him about the nanny.
Could I get the question again?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not being very clear. You talked to your dad, didn't you testify today that you talked to your dad on the day of your mother's death about you being the nanny?
I did talk to him
Okay, and it was that day?
that day, not on the phone though, so,
But that was in person?
yes,
Okay. And it was, you said that conversation occurred on the day of your mother's death?
yes, I believe so.
Okay, do you recall telling Doug Whitney that that conversation occurred on the day of your mother's funeral?
I do not. My dad brought up
Can
a
you
lot
turn to
of things
page
and a lot of different.
18 of the
Doug Whitney?
interview with Doug Whitney?
18.
And I'm sorry, I know this is very cumbersome and tedious. Page 18.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question when you ask it, so.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You were talking to Doug Whitney on this page in lines 23, 24, and 25 about your conversation with your dad about you being the nanny?
So I'm only allowed to read lines 23, 24, 25?
Well, will you just read them in your mind and then just answer my question?
Okay. so
Okay,
the
does
que-
that refresh your memory that you were talking to Doug Whitney about your conversations with
It's
your dad about
really-
being the nanny?
So you'd like me to read this
Yeah.
now, then
Well,
answer that question?
Can you just read it silently to yourself, lines 23, 24, and 25?
Okay, I read those lines, and now,
And does that refresh your memory that you were talking to Doug Whitney about when you talked to your dad about you wanting to quit your job and be the nanny?
reading these lines, does that refresh my memory?
Yes. That's what you were talking to Doug Whitney about.
I wish I could read the whole thing and then see it.
Okay, well,
It's-
why don't you just go up to line 15 and read the whole
Thank
thing
you.
silently and just
Okay,
see if
thank you.
that's what you guys were talking about. Does that Does that refresh your memory that that's what you were talking to Doug Whitney about at that portion of the interview?
Sorry, just a moment. Does this refresh my memory
Yeah.
that I spoke with Doug Whitney about this?
Yes. Does that refresh your memory about that's what, at this portion of the interview that you were talking to Doug Whitney about your dad and yourself having a conversation about you being the nanny?
Yes.
Okay. And so Doug Whitney said, the day of the funeral, he comes to you, and he says, and then what was your response to that?
I'm
On
sorry,
line
what line?
28? Can you just read your response?
right.
Right.
what I said.
And so when you were responding to right, what Doug was talking about was that your dad had come up to you on the day of the funeral, and you were talking about the nanny situation and whether you were going to be the nanny or not, right?
My dad repeated things a lot, and we repeatedly had different conversations. So if I'm not understanding exactly your question.
Okay, my
Right
question
now.
is that today you testified that your dad had a conversation about you being the nanny on the day that your mother died.
Well, and that's the day that I quit my job.
Okay.
Yes.
But in this transcript, you didn't say that to Doug Whitney in this transcript, or do you not remember telling him that that didn't occur on that date? Your conversation?
When I was speaking with Doug Whitney, with everything that's happened, and as much as has happened, I do not recall if when, or if there's no way I could have said every single thing in that interview. But I may have. I don't know if I stated it here or not, because I haven't read this,
Okay.
and this was a long time ago.
All right, no, that's fair.
I'm sorry.
Continue. And you stated that your dad didn't want you to be the nanny. Is that right?
No, he did not.
And he didn't want you to be the nanny because of your mental state. Isn't that right, Rachel?
Objection, speculation.
Are we on a page?
Isn't that,
Sustained as to hearsay and state of mind of the defendant. You may inquire if she knows any other reason.
do you know of any other reason that your dad was concerned about you not being the nanny?
I don't remember.
You testified today that you had seen Gypsy at the Utah State Developmental Center.
I may have seen her there. Yes.
But you're not sure?
I am not 100% sure about seeing Gypsy at the Utah State Developmental Center, but I did see my father with a woman that was there that I believe was Gypsy, and I believe
Okay, and this is the first
her.
time that you've stated that, right?
to whom?
To anybody?
I don't remember if that's the first time I've stated that to anybody. I do not believe that's.
Do you recall stating that to Doug Whitney?
I do not recall what was everything that was in the interview.
Or do you recall stating it
If
at
I'm
the
asked to-
preliminary hearing?
I do not recall everything that was stated at the preliminary hearing.
I understand. Now, at your mother's funeral, you were reading from your journal. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and did you write in your journal every day?
I don't remember if I wrote in it every day.
But you wrote in it how many times a week?
I don't remember exactly, how many times I wrote in my journal.
Okay. What did your journal look like?
I've had a lot of journals, so I'm not sure what journal you're referring to.
What about the journal that you read at your mother's funeral?
I believe it was a green journal.
A green journal, like a green bound journal? It was bound? And it was leather or what? Can you describe that?
I've had a lot of journals. I believe it was just a green journal that had the word journal on the cover.
Okay. And at the preliminary hearing, you told me that you had turned that journal in to Doug Whitney?
I don't remember saying that. I'm
Or
sorry.
that you had turned in everything you had? Isn't that right? All of the documentation that he requested?
Everything that was requested, I did turn in.
And then you received a subpoena from Randy Spencer a while ago?
I did,
Okay, and Randy Spencer is the attorney for your dad?
yes.
Okay, and he requested that you turn over your journal, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you stated that you didn't have the journal.
Could not find my journal. Most of my things are in a different state. I just moved. So. They're still in a different state.
Okay, now you stated that your dad was joking at the funeral?
That my dad was, yeah, he made a joke at the funeral. That's how he opened his talk.
And, but you saw him throughout the funeral and the funeral luncheon?
Yes, he was on the stage, or I don't know what to call it. At the funeral, he stayed on
Podium?
well, near the podium. He sat near the podium. He directed the music, and
Okay, well, after the funeral, there was a funeral luncheon, and he was mingling and talking to people?
after the funeral, there was a luncheon. Yes,
And you stated at the preliminary hearing that in some conversations, he was sad, right?
I do not recall stating that at the preliminary hearing.
Do you recall seeing your dad sad at the funeral at times, talking to people?
I do not recall.
Can you look at 1571 of the preliminary hearing transcript, please?
Preliminary hearing, 1571.
1571.
All right, thank you.
And in this portion that I'm referring you to, Rachel, I'm talking
On
about...
what line?
On line 17.
Okay.
You
And I was
read the question and she'll read the answer.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, it's a little bit confusing here,
Yes,
but
it's very confusing.
your answer was, it's clear at the top here. Does that
So what
refresh,
line?
let me ask you this. Will you read from 17 to 25, line 17 to 25?
So you want me to read the answer,
Just
and then you read the question? Okay.
just read it in your mind, I'm sorry. Silently. Okay, does that refresh your memory as to what I was asking you at the preliminary hearing in regards to the funeral and your dad?
You're asking me what you asked at the preliminary hearing? I'm not sure who even asked
Does this
this.
refresh your memory in terms of what I was asking about your dad's demeanor and whether he was smiling or sad at the funeral? Does that refresh your memory, what you just read, that that's what I was asking you?
So the question you're asking is if my memory is now refreshed reading this, if this happened at the funeral.
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay. And
I just
does
didn't know
that
if
refresh
you
your
were the
memory
person.
that you saw that your dad was sad at the funeral as well, not just smiling?
I'm sorry, could you say the question again?
After reading that, do you recall that your dad was sad at the funeral when talking with other people?
Yes, I mean, smile and
Yeah, and he would kind of fluctuate back and forth. That's what you said. He would be sad, and then he would be smiling, right?
depending on who he was talking to. When he
Exactly.
talked to Gypsy, he was happy.
Oh, okay, so that, you've never said that
Florine
before to
or-
anybody, Rachel, have you?
I don't know. I don't recall
So
exactly.
that's new information, that he's just smiling. So now you're saying that he was smiling and laughing at Gypsy at the funeral?
I believe Gypsy was at the funeral. I just remember that he was especially happy or smiling towards a few people, and I believe Gypsy was one of them.
Okay, and that's the first time you've ever said that, right?
In my life? Or, no,
In a court hearing or to any kind of investigator?
I do not recall everything I've said. Sorry.
Now let's talk about your dad's toe. You knew he had problems with his toe?
He had a big toe.
And he had problems with that toe?
He said it hurt.
Do you recall an incident when you were staying at your mom and dad's house after the death of your mother? And your dad was up in the kitchen and you were downstairs in a bedroom? And do you recall describing how you were listening to your dad walk across the kitchen floor?
I believe you've asked me this question before at the preliminary hearing.
Do you recall me asking that question?
I believe so. I believe you asked me that question.
And do you recall that happening? Do you recall you being in a bedroom downstairs and your dad was in the kitchen upstairs?
Yes.
Okay, and that he was doing kind of a hop, drag, hop, drag, hop, drag is how you described it?
I don't remember exactly, but I remember you asking me that question before. I believe you asked me that during the preliminary hearing.
And do you
I believe you did.
okay, do you remember saying that? That you could hear a step drag, like he was dragging his leg?
Do I remember saying that?
Do you remember an incident where your dad was in the kitchen, you were downstairs in the bedroom, and you would hear a step drag or a hop drag?
I do not remember, but I believe you asked me this question before in the preliminary hearing.
All right, but that doesn't refresh your memory?
The question doesn't refresh my memory?
Do you have an independent recollection of your dad doing a hop drag in the kitchen? That's all I'm asking.
I don't remember.
Now, you stated today that your dad was moving some sheetrock.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Running.
and you stated that you didn't help him with the sheetrock. Is that what you said today?
No, I never said that today.
Okay. Tell me what you said about the sheetrock. today? Or tell me what is your testimony about the sheetrock on your dad?
I helped my dad move giant sheetrock in the home.
Okay, so you did help him.
Well, he was running down the stairs with sheetrock, and I would grab sheetrock and run down the stairs too. So, I mean, I didn't help him physically lift it. I was trying to race him so he wouldn't do it all himself because he was grabbing it and running it. I don't need any help. That's what he was doing.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to clear that up.
Okay.
Now, you stated that it was unusual for your dad to give you $5,000.
Yes. Just
But
$5,000?
he gave you a car, isn't that right? He bought you a car?
yes.
And when did he buy you a car?
I believe that was in 2001, but I'm not exactly sure of the date.
Okay, so he did buy you a car. And he paid
Well,
for,
my dad and mom,
okay, and your mother.
yes. But my dad gave us $5,000.
Okay.
So my dad and mom got
He
me
also paid for your 2 weddings?
My dad paid for them?
Yes.
Yes.
And the one wedding was at Hotel Del Coronado in Coronado?
The wedding did not take place there.
The reception took place there.
We ate after. There was not a formal reception.
Okay, but he paid for that?
We ate lunch.
He paid for that?
I believe my dad paid for that, yes.
Okay, and he paid for your honeymoon?
For my honeymoon. I believe so, yes.
And he paid to put you up in the Hotel Del Coronado with your new husband?
Yes, so he paid for the weddings.
Yes.
Yes.
So your second wedding, your dad paid for that as well?
He paid for both weddings.
And then you were also asking him in April of 2007 that you wanted a new computer, right?
I was asking him for a new computer
Yes. Did you ask your dad for a new computer?
in April of 2007.
Yes.
I do not recall. Did I ask him for a computer? I don't
Yeah.
remember that at all.
Did you ever have any conversations with your dad about wanting a new computer set up in April of 2007 or March of 2007?
I do not recall. I don't remember.
All right. Did
Sorry.
you get a computer?
I bought a computer with the $5,000 he gave me. I do not, so I could make a website in tribute to my mom.
Okay. And he also, he furnished your house in Utah?
At my house in Utah?
Yes.
What
Whenever
house?
you lived in Utah, did he furnish your home?
Did my father furnish my home? I don't know what you're, I've never owned a home,
Okay,
and so I'm,
apartment, did he pay for the furnishings in your apartment?
in what apartment?
I don't know, in any apartment.
My dad, my mom would help. She would come in and decorate my apartment.
Yeah, and she would buy couches, and she'd buy tables, and she would decorate.
My mom?
Yes.
Would she decorate, my mom? Yes, she decorated my
And
apartment.
she paid for that, didn't she?
Did my mom pay for it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and your mother didn't work, meaning your dad was,
She did work.
Well,
She did a lot of work.
she didn't work outside the home and earn a paycheck.
She did not earn a paycheck.
Okay, so.
She did a lot of work.
I know, and I take that
Okay.
back. I don't mean to insult her. that
Oh,
she
no,
didn't work.
I was just letting you know.
Just saying that your father contributed to furnishing your apartment in Utah, right?
Because my father was the provider, then if my mother spent money, then yes, I guess that it was a joint bank account.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, I'll just move on. And then you also lived in Seattle?
Yes, I've lived in Seattle.
Okay, did you have a house there or an apartment?
And I've had an apartment.
Okay, and when did you live in Seattle?
Sustained.
I lived in Seattle a couple of times. So
your dad lived up there at the same time?
In Seattle, no.
Okay. Or in
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know.
So you had, when did you live in Seattle?
What, I've lived in Seattle. I'm not sure the exact date, but I believe it was around year 2000, 2001. But I don't remember the exact date. And then also I moved there again in, I believe it was 2004, but I'm not sure of the exact date.
Okay, and in
Counsel, will you approach the bench? To use the restroom and stretch your legs. Please keep in mind my prior admonition. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form or express any opinion. Do no research on your own. Avoid media coverage of the case. Court's in recess.